Hello, welcome to Author Hour. I'm your host, Richard Lyntton, author of North Korea Deception, Book 1 in the Deception series. Hyde Park Deception, Book 2 in the Deception series, is being released October 2021, and here is a special treat. You are the first to see the cover on television, but more than enough about me. Today, I would like to welcome Christine Miles, who is an author, professional keynote speaker, consultant, executive coach, thought leader, entrepreneur, and recognized world expert in the field of listening differently. She has helped thousands of executives, individuals, and families expand human connections, transforming businesses and lives. Christine believes the ability to understand is the key to personal and professional success. Christine!
Nice to meet you.
It's so lovely to meet you. It's so lovely to meet people, like we have a mutual friend.
Yes.
And I've sort of heard about you. And it's kind of even more fun to meet someone when we're doing this show, but we don't really know each other that well.
Yeah, this is great.
So let us start. First of all, I just want to say how crisp and just it's fantastic. And we were just talking about the cover. Just going to read the title once again. What is it costing you not to listen? The power of understanding to connect, influence, solve, and sell. Let's just go, we're going to talk about that obviously, but just tell me about that cover, because it was interesting what you were telling me. You just told me before we started that your editors wanted you to have like illustrations, and you said, no, I just want white. Tell us about that process.
Yeah, well, isn't editing the hardest thing in life? Has a lot to do with listening as well. So, but yeah, I think that I wanted it to be something that made a statement, and I think with the help of my team, we realized less is more.
What about color? How did the colors come into it?
Yeah, I think that we wanted to eliminate all the noise so that we could really focus on that word listening and also the power of the question.
But the white, because again, when I went to the Amazon page, it does stand out just being white, which I think is really clever. Was that mostly you saying, no, I want it just mainly white, I don't want extra illustrations?
Yeah, I didn't start there. Mm-hmm. And again, I had some really good advice and help with my team and my designer.
Yep.
But I think that the other thing is that we wanted it to feel like a textbook, that right. This is something that we need to learn. This is not something that is assumed.
Right.
My dream is for this to get into colleges, into schools.
Okay.
So that's something that would be tremendous. So I wanted it to feel like this is something we need to learn,
right.
Not something that's just going to happen.
So let's just reel back a bit. I mean, there's so much to you, like all those different things that you do. I think probably best just to tell me, tell us a little bit about yourself and how did it come about that only last March. Wait, you're saying 6 months ago, you only decided to write the book, or what did you just tell me? You said you only decided to write 6 months ago?
It was the last winter storm we had here in the Philadelphia area. I was watching Hamilton, and I went, oh, I got to write another book.
Right.
Yeah.
So but literally 6 months ago.
Literally 6 months ago.
Wow. Okay, so take us back before then. Who are you? Where are you from? How did you get to doing all this listening stuff? I was also saying to you just before the show, like I feel like I'm not quite sure what you are, because it's so rare that you hear that someone is like a listening coach or a listening executive. Mm-hmm. So try and explain a little bit more about how you got to this position in your life.
Yeah, well, that's been a process of editing as well. It's always been the foundation of the house in absolutely everything I do.
Okay.
So I think that what's emotional intelligence, having language around what you do and why you do it.
Okay.
So I grew up in Hershey, mm-hmm. Pennsylvania,
Great.
very rural, idyllic atmosphere, youngest of two. My father was an entrepreneur in his own right. Mm-hmm. Started as a chicken feed salesman, graduated from Penn State as an agricultural student, they called him a chicken doctor. He told me that story. He's 89. Charming name. Well, apparently what you feed the chickens matters.
Absolutely.
So he was successful at that and parlayed that into a career selling life insurance, and then started his own firms, mm-hmm. Servicing small businesses. So I love business, and I saw that very early. He talked about his clients. I knew about his clients. They were part of the family. Mm-hmm. They were part of the fold. The other side of the story was my mother, who was quite warm and charismatic and quite loving, very funny. but had a lot of pain underneath the surface, and my anointed role in the family was to understand her pain.
Okay.
So I learned to listen differently starting at 5.
Okay, interesting. Because I feel, when I first heard about you, one of my immediate thoughts was my mother sort of saying, "You never listen." Don't all our parents say that to us? You don't listen. And then when we started this show, I remember people sort of saying, "Well, you kind of cut in on people," and I'm like, "Well, but that's how I talk. I want to find out. I want to find out the answer." And I think it's just so fundamental and so interesting that you really honing on. It's not like other things. It's the listening. Tell me what you were saying, like in the intro, about explain to us why the listening with the understanding is important.
Well, my parents actually expected me to listen and pay attention not only to what was said, but what was not said.
Right.
Because again, my mother had this dichotomy of spirits. She had this outward appearance that looked happy and wonderful and outgoing, but there was this dark pain because she had lost her mother from being born. Childbirth killed my grandmother. So I can only imagine, as my mother's pain was, I killed my mother.
Yeah.
So it was pretty deep. So with that, I was told, listen differently. Listen to what isn't said. Listen to understand. And it's really just been the single thread to any success I've had. I know who I am. I have pretty average abilities except for this. But it was taught to me. It wasn't assumed. It wasn't something I was born with.
But listen, because they say children should be seen, not heard. So they're listening. But do you feel like you were taught to then give back, to come back with your own questions?
Never had any limitations on what I was allowed to ask or understand beyond my years. So there was definitely some burden in that. Don't get me wrong. But the blessing was that it gave me language that most people don't have. And what you just said about, but I want to know, I want to interrupt. Yeah. Sometimes that's part of listening.
Yeah, right.
It's not a passive act. It's what you seek to understand and how you go about it that differentiates you as a listener. But it's not just about being passive or attentive or active. This is a whole different realm. It's joining with the person that's talking and finding and discovering something in that conversation, the insight.
Again, I had a thought driving here this morning that was masks, right? Masks. And I'm thinking, okay, let's ask Christine. It's all very well, you write the book and it's, you teach it, whatever. But like when you have at the moment, as we do, this ridiculously polarized country, world really, I mean, let's face it. How on earth, Christine, do you use your techniques to, when people just are so diametrically opposed, they won't listen to one another, they won't listen to facts. I feel like people just aren't even discussing these days about facts. It's just so bizarre. I mean, anyway, I won't go on about that. Can you tell me, like you were there and two people talking about one wants to wear a mask, one doesn't want to wear a mask.
Yeah.
I mean, you must have thought this about you must think this every day. How do you use your techniques to help people solve those arguments?
Yeah, well, this is from the world problems to the boardroom to the teammates, to the classmates, to the sports teammates, whoever.
Right.
So there's lots of difficult conversations. I think this one's so incredibly polarizing. The idea that people think that understanding and agreement have anything to do with each other is the first problem.
Interesting.
So we have to first seek to understand. Most people address conflict. Think about your spouse, your children, whoever. What do? We talk about what we disagree about, not what we agree about. I'm not saying anything novel here, but how do you do that? We're not taught how. So people say, well, empathize. Well, what if my ability to empathize isn't as good as your ability? How do I learn to empathize? Listening actually gets you to empathy, not the other way around. So how do I understand your point of view, even if I don't agree with it? When we start there, we don't agree to disagree. If we agree to understand, we are further down the road to making connections.
So when you say understand, you don't necessarily mean the big picture topic that they're saying, the science over vaccination, say. You're saying understand that sentence that person just spoke, crystal clear, 100% no.
I need to understand why you don't want to wear a mask.
Right.
What's bothering you?
Right.
If I understand you as a human,
Right.
we're going to have a more meaningful conversation.
Right.
We tend to go at what we don't agree, and I think we're missing each other. We're missing people.
Yeah.
And fundamentally, I believe in humans.
Yeah.
And so if we go with that approach, we change the world. And that's a lot of why I wrote the book, that we're teaching people how to tell, talk, and know,
Yep.
and not how to listen.
Tell, talk, and know. Yeah. And I'm assuming you think that, from kindergarten upwards.
Have you ever had a course in listening?
No.
Neither have I.
No. That's and you do that, right? You go into schools, is that right?
I go into schools, and my team, I go into large corporations, small corporations. I learned to listen differently because of my circumstances.
Yeah.
I have a master's in psychology.
Okay.
In undergrad, I'm a certified family therapist from a world-renowned facility at the time. Never had a course in listening.
Right.
At 22, when I started my career, believe it or not, as a family therapist, knocking on people's doors, never did I do more selling. I was successful beyond my years because I already had that ability. I showed up with that.
Okay.
So I tended to exceed expectations because I was listening to understand rather than trying to tell people what to do.
So you were a therapist. You did study psychology, because I still want people to understand what it is you do, because it's so kind of unusual. I mean, you wouldn't just say, "Oh, I'm a listener," or would you? Like, how do you, like, when people say, if when your book comes out, oh, what does that lady do? What does that writer do? What are you? Are you a listener when you go into schools and teach teachers to listen?
Well, it's the foundation of the house. Listening is fundamentally the most human skill I think we all need that's not been taught.
Right.
So foundationally throughout my career, no matter what I've done, listening's always been a big part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Why I decided in March while watching Hamilton to write the book is it's time to create the revolution around why aren't we paying attention to this? The pandemic has made the world more aware that we are disconnected, sometimes by force and sometimes by digital and sometimes because we don't know how. So how do we join that together? So my organization teaches you how to listen differently, well beyond what's been traditionally taught as attentive or active listening.
Can you give us? I want to tell people what they're going to get when they buy your book. Not if, when they buy your book. So I want to definitely just give us a bit more detail on the book, but. Can you give us like a couple of, because it's already, you got to listen, you got to learn. Like, what do you mean by that? Can you give us specific examples? I mean, is it a question of sort of being zen and just saying, I'm going to slow my mind, I'm going to look the person in the eye? Like, can you give us a couple of ideas?
So I think this is part of why we've all failed, because the little bit we do know about listening is how to attend, and it's such a low bar. Like, look, I'm paying attention, that means I'm listening. So do you make eye contact? Are you present? Well, unfortunately, the brain is the enemy of listening. So even when people are trying really hard, they're failing, because people tend to hear 17 to 25% of what's heard or retain it.
Really?
That's a pretty low
statistic.
Is that a fact? Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, retention is 17 to 25% of what we hear.
Wow.
And part of it is we're relying on hearing and not the skill of listening. So what they're going to get in the book is really the journey of how to listen, the how as well as why it matters, and the things you can do to set up the teller as well as be the listener. And some of those tools, it's like going on the analogy we use is really if you're backpacking and hiking on a mountainous trail, you need to be prepared. You better have some tools in your backpack to get you to the other side of the mountain.
Right, and what are some of those tools? Like, can you give us maybe an example of, you go into a school or a business and the super successful person in charge, but what don't they have, would you say?
Yeah, they
They're
don't.
Not a good listener.
They probably are better than most. And again, even when we're better than most, we're still failing. You describe that in yourself. You're probably better than most. You do this for a living to some extent. So the tools are really 5 fundamental tools that we marry together to take that person to the other side of the trail. So one of those is, what's the map? Like, I'm in a conversation with you, we're talking about masks. Well, how do I know where to go? It's like telling a joke. When you're telling a story or you're telling somebody something, if you don't know where the path is, they're not going to come along with you. Yeah. So you really become the guide when you have the map in the conversation.
So if we're talking about Mars, what do you mean by the map? Like the what we both want Like, just explain that.
What's your story?
Okay.
Whether that's a sentence, that's a paragraph, that's 20 minutes. What do I need to understand?
About the mask.
About your feelings, your thoughts, your ideas about why you don't, for example, don't want to wear a mask. What's the path to that story? Where are the stops? That's the second tool.
So in other words, it might be that, my mother was injected with something that killed her, or that's what you mean by the map.
Or my kids feel marginalized because they can't read expressions, or they get claustrophobic, or they get anxious. They're already anxious. If I don't understand that, but I need to know that trail, I need to know that map and what I need to uncover. Of that
person you're listening to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
So having the map of knowing where we're going in any conversation, what I need to find out, the different milestones on that map. What's the beginning of your story? You just went back to the beginning. Maybe my mother had an injection. What's the struggle? Why do you feel the way you feel? What are the things that are going on? That's part of that map and those stops. And then it's really, okay, maybe I heard you, but how do I know that I heard you? And how do I get to that information and those feelings? I need to have the right questions.
So map is the one thing. Do you want to share a couple of other tools?
Yeah, so the map is one, the stops are the other. Where are the milestones on that path, on that map? Yeah. And then the third is...
What do you mean by stop, though? Like, where...
Yeah, stops meaning where's the beginning, the struggle, the tipping point. Much like you tell a story as an actor or as a writer. Just as you're listening, when you're telling the story, you have stops and milestones, don't you? Okay. So you're the teller, I'm getting your story. If I know what those stops are and what I need to uncover, that helps me guide you in the conversation. Okay. We all know that being curious is a good part of listening. The problem is curiosity can also interfere. So we can ask some very specific questions. You describe that. I want to know, I want to know. Yeah. Are we chasing what I want to know or what you need to tell me? So we have 6 questions that interviewers and therapists use that are fundamental. Some of those are, tell me more. Not tell me more about your book cover, just tell me more. Or how about, how does that make you feel? People don't want to ask that question in business, or it doesn't occur to them to ask that.
How does it make you feel? These are good. These are juicy. So tell me more. How do it make you feel?
Take me back to the beginning. Nice. Most of us start with the problem. If you're in a business conversation or you're in a personal conversation, I don't want to wear the mask. Yeah. And we go, take me forward. Why don't you take me back? Take me back to the beginning.
So what? Correct me if I'm wrong. So if you're starting to get into it with someone, and let's stick with the mask analogy, you could just sort of say, "Whoa, take me back to the beginning."
Yep.
It's a beautiful, simple thing. I don't think I ever say that. Take me back to the beginning, but it's a great way of just.
And you slow the teller down. Together, now you're on the path together, and now you know the map. So now you know where to guide the teller to go. All right, now we get the beginning. Tell me more. What's the struggle? How does it make you feel to have to be told to wear a mask? Right. If your kid's anxious, tell me more. Then what happened? That's another question.
Then what happened?
Then what happened? We tend to shape the story when we're the listener rather than letting the story come to us. We call that the curious detective versus the defense attorney. Yeah. And this is where people fail because their own fact-chasing curiosity contaminates the story. So that's the next tool, is how do you uncover and make sure we're aligned and that I actually heard what you had to say and got you. So that's that filter that says, hey, do I get you? Do I get you? Let me reflect. Let me reflect what I heard, and then let me affirm. Let me see if I get you. One of the reasons you don't want to wear the mask is your mother had suffered an illness. Something happened. Your kid's anxious. They can't see faces. This must be difficult for you. Do I get you?
Right. Yeah, that's a really good technique as well. It's something I don't do. I'm trying to think if I do any of this stuff.
You're not alone. You're not alone.
So when you're teaching. So say you've got someone like a teacher or a businessman who's used to speaking to people. Yeah. How do you suggest that even though you're speaking all day or whatever, how do you teach them that it's also important to listen? Do you see what I'm asking?
Yeah, well, that's part of why, again, I went through against initial medical advice, naming the book The Problem instead of the Solution. Okay. What I realized is this.
You say, what is it costing you not to listen? Tell us about that, because that was interesting too. So the title, you're saying they told you you shouldn't tell people that there's a problem.
Yeah, don't start, yelling at the reader that they're not doing so great, right? So, but it's not your fault. It's not anybody's fault that we don't know how to listen. We haven't devoted any time or resource to it. Only 2% of people have any kind of listening training, and it's usually just a day or two. 2%.
That's crazy.
It's crazy. When the higher in an organization you get, if you're an executive level, 80% of your day is listening.
Right.
So sales, leadership is all about problem solving.
Right.
In order to solve problems, we need to listen differently. And one of the things that I discovered in my own writing of the book is that listening is the source of the problem. It's also the solution to the problem.
Right.
So the reason for that is it's a silent epidemic. Like, think about it, our relationships. I used to wonder as a young therapist, why are people getting divorced after 20 years of marriage? Well, they're not checking in with each other and listening to learn and understand about each other along the way. The story that goes off in our brains might be, you work too much, and if we're married, you might be, well, you spend too much time with the kids. Well, I spend too much time with the kids because you work too much. But we're not having that conversation to really make sure we understand the story we're telling ourselves. And the gap happens, death by 1,000 cuts, and then people are divorcing after a number of years.
I just have to tell you a quick story this morning. I was like really, it wasn't really because I knew I was going to interview you, but I was like really trying. My wife dresses beautifully, but this one thing she wore today, she was going on a trip to Martha's Vineyard, and I just thought, that looks a little bit flouncy to me, this thing.
Okay.
And I said, and she's always telling me, I'm going to have a go today. I'm going to tell her what I think.
Risky guy.
So I said, is that what you're wearing? And then she said, yes, I like it, or something. And I said, just I said something like, why don't you take a picture in the bathroom mirror and see if you like it? And I thought, and so she said, I love it, or something. And I went, I love it too.
Okay.
And this was like both calling each other and texting.
Right.
But anyway, I thought, I'm not going to say why I didn't like that thing in particular. I'm going to just say a little something. And then she definitely really likes what she's wearing today, so I'm not going to go there.
So you tried to understand first what she might be thinking, feeling, before you inserted don't or this or that.
Yeah,
right? Smart.
I think. I don't know. I didn't analyze it too much, but
yeah.
I think that's what you always say. But it's how often do we not do that? That's the point. You said when you said it was an epidemic before the show, also when we were chatting. I mean, you really sounded like passionate that you just so believe that it is. Can you just talk a little bit more about the consequences? Like, because you obviously do believe that. Why is not listening, and you use the word epidemic?
Well, so part of my story is I was 31 when I suffered a serious injury from a cervical spine injury.
Oh, wow.
So I was in a car accident, and what I learned is that people who knew me and really cared about me and knew the story had a hard time empathizing. They couldn't see it. It's almost like this sad pandemic. We can't see the problem. It's intangible, but it's painful. People are suffering in lots of different ways. That's the same thing that's happening with listening. We're missing the invisible disease that's going on, which is disconnection, not feeling not only heard but truly understood.
Okay.
And that's leading to disengagement with employees. That's leading to business loss. We don't understand our customers. We're solving the wrong problems. Our relationships are suffering. Our kids are disconnected from us. And we just don't even know that the problem's existing, which is why the question is it costing you? What is it costing you not to listen? If you ask yourself that question, you'll have your answer. One of the things I talked about is it's how we rate our driving ability. You say, are you a good driver? Most people think they're a better driver than they are.
Right,
Typically, that's true with how we rate our listening ability as well.
Right. Do you, do you feel that, how else do you think it's really impacting, our lives like nowadays? Because you've written a whole book about it. So, you're just one person, and you sort of, like I say, it's a really an unusual thing. I feel like that you've sort of not come across, but that you're doing. You know, how do you see it going forward? How are you going to get people to? I mean, you've written the book, but are you saying that, you know, absolutely, you know, we should start introducing this as in the curriculum sort of thing at school?
I think that the earlier we learn this, the more effective we're going to be. We're not preparing our kids to be ready in the world, and listening is like oxygen. We need it in our systems, our individual systems, our relationship systems, our business systems. The airflow can be constricted and we'll be okay for a while, but eventually we're gonna kill the organism.
Right.
And so I think that it's just awareness first in order to solve the problem.
How do you want? Tell us about the launch. It's in October.
It is.
Book's coming out in October. Do you have any kind of plan? Again, we didn't talk too much about the writing process. I always do this, skip over the writing process. Never mind. Next time, I'll have you back. But what have you got any sort of plans for the launch? Are you gonna sort of do Zoom launches around the country? Like, do you have any?
Yeah, we're gonna do a book launch virtually, just to be the safest in this pandemic world. And then I mean, this isn't new for us. The book is really the calling card to have people pay more attention. But we've been doing work inside of schools and organizations for quite some time. I have a team of people that can go in and help transform how you listen in a business as teams, create that connection. And we do that both virtually and in person. The pandemic world, there was so much disconnection, and people were like, this can't work, this is a human skill. I go, it's needed more than ever because we're dispersed as teams. We need to understand each other differently.
Why do you think it is so hard to listen? Is social media and electronics to do with it? Do you think it's changed over the last 10, 20 years? Has it become harder to listen, do you think?
I do think it's harder because we have more distractions, but it's the brain, and we're not taught how. We've been blaming the listener for not, and I ask executives all the time, you know, what is it costing you? Is listening important? They raise their hand, absolutely. What are you doing about it? Nothing.
Nothing. So people can literally hire you, invite you into their homes, schools, businesses. And what would that look like? Sort of one person comes in for the day and just sort of observes and then sort of gives you lessons? How would that look like?
That's a great question. This is behavioral change. Listening is hard. We've made it simple, but not easy. So I'm an athlete by background. I've always learned the techniques of things, and if everything could have a yellow cover on it, like this for dummy, that's me.
Right.
So how do you simplify the hardest skill, human skill?
Yep.
We've done that.
Yep.
We'll give you the tools for your backpack.
Yep.
We have the framework. We'll help you practice that by way of coming in and doing workshops with teams, anywhere from 25 to 40 people. And then we bring a team with you so that we can coach much like a sports camp, so that you're practicing and applying right away.
Amazing. And it's www.equipt, EQUIPT
That's right.
people.com, right?
We're going to equip you how to listen.
Love it. Fantastic. Yeah. Wow. So interesting. Well, look, it really is, you know, one of the beauties of a good non-fiction book is like the simplicity. So I think this is it. I mean, what is it costing you not to listen? The power of understanding to connect, influence, solve, and sell. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christine. And congratulations on your second book as well.
Thank you so much. Christine, that was an absolutely fascinating conversation on listening. Thanks for coming to us today. Don't forget, Christine's book is out this month, October 2021. You can find out more about it. What is it costing you not to listen at www.equipped-people.com, or check out the book on Amazon. Break a leg, Christine, with the book and the launch. Take care. Hope you're safe and well. We're going to leave you with a final little treat, which is the book trailer for my book, Hyde Park Deception, Book 2, coming out in October.